Hello and welcome to Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers.
By writers.
To keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Shingai.
LP here.
I'm Jenna.
Oh, I'm Yvette.
And I'm Will.
All right, guys. We got a crew together tonight for something I cannot wait to talk about. And I was telling the people that are all here right now that I've been ignoring spoilers. I saw one trailer and I just saw this movie last night. So I'm amped to talk about it with some of my favorite people. They've been talking about it since it came out. And anyway, the point is we're all going to talk about this movie Sinners tonight. I'm going to throw it over to Will in just a second, but Shingai is going to drive us through some of whatever you guys have all been talking about. I'm just here introing. I'm going to go along for the ride. So Will, I'm going to throw it to you and then we'll go over to Shingai. I can't wait to see what you guys got to say.
Just so everyone knows, Yvette has actually been on the podcast before. You can check out her discussion on episode 108, and I'm throwing it to Shingai.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have Yvette here, y'all. This is my writing wife for the last couple of years and co-founder of Voodoonauts. And today we're talking about Sinners, which is probably one of the best films I've seen in a long ass time. I actually would put it up there with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is, maybe my favorite movie of all time currently. So let's get right into it. My first question for you all that will help us understand the movie a little bit more. How did this film change, clarify, expand, or affirm your perspective on art making? It's a big question. Yes, LP.
It's good. No,
It is.
It's really good, y'all. I'm with Shingai on this. Honestly, I know LP was about to talk, but this is one of the best things I've seen in a long time. It's amazing. So I second it's good, LP.
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways, this whole film is about cultural production. It's about the things that make communities and the things that bind them. And in some cases, like when we talk about what I loved about it was like, yes, the juke joint had a capitalist goal, but it was a place where people were going to gamble. They were going to dance. They were going to play cards. They were going to sing. They're going to catch music. And like, they were going to be in these spaces that were safe for them and they were going to drink because Prohibition hadn't ended yet. Right. And also there were laws that disallow Black people from spending time together. You can be in large groups together because that was illegal. So they would build shacks in woods and shit, and people would play music and do this like deep in the cut, which is why, this was so far from the town. But the culture production is something that we would see in church sometimes, but they were just like, this is going to be a place where grown folks can do grown sexy shit and just like enjoy themselves. And like that for like the first hour of the movie was what it was about. Like picking the people to do the things and the people that they trusted. And we'll come back to this in a minute, I'm sure, but like they sought out specific people for specific roles. It wasn't just like, oh, I see this random Black person. I was like, no, I want Cornbread. I want Slim. Sammy, come on. Oh, you can play and sing. That's crazy. Come on, you too. We want Annie to cook. Grace needs to do the sign, and we're gonna buy the fish from Bo. And like they knew how to galvanize this community for this thing. And like in that way, it was such a beautiful movie. And then things were left.
Yes, Yvette.
Yeah, I love that LP. For me, it like reminded me of that Toni Morrison quote about her approach to writing, where and I'm loosely like paraphrasing the quote. She says that I stood at the border, stood at the margins, and claimed it as central and let the rest of the world move over to where I was. So making like the margins central. And I think that's something Ryan Coogler was doing here. We've got the blues, we've got hoodoo, we've got, centering it in Mississippi, in Jim Crow. And for me, that has just affirmed that I need to make my stuff, my work, Blacker, more African. I always talk about one of my favorite writers, Jennifer Makumbi. She's a Ugandan writer. Her book, Chintu, literally changed my life and brought me into magical realism, speculative fiction. And her book was rejected because they said it was too African to be publishable. And I've always said, like, damn, like, that's actually my goal. That's the bar. Like, I want to write something that's too African to be publishable. And I feel like Ryan Coogler is doing that with every project. He's just, centering where he's from, centering his people. And that inspires me so much.
That's amazing. We were actually just talking about this in the group chat, like for the last 3 hours, and like what cultural work gets to be considered universal and how some of our work doesn't have to be and shouldn't have to be universal. Marshall and Jenna, your hands were both up. Marshall.
Yeah. So LP reminded one of my favorite aspects of the beginning of the movie was that picking of the people. It reminded me of like, who do you get when it's time to go to war, to go and do a thing, to create something? And that community was it was so amazing to see that Smoke and Stack put those folks together. And I loved every aspect of that. It reminded me too, before I went to see the film, I was editing the episode that will be released by now, that Maurice Broaddus was most recently on. And he was talking about how he writes in community, how a lot of his work is based in building community and all this stuff. And like that was, and I knew that the movie was going to take a turn. I knew that much at least, but like that early part, it was just so nice to see all of those people come together and every aspect of the community, everybody's skills, everything coming together was just it was beautiful. That scene, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, I think the scene that really did it for me, and I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. When they got the party going, and there was that scene where all of the time and cultures and dances all were mixed in with the voiceover and stuff. I was just like, I was like, I don't know. I was reacting to some type of way in the theater, as the only Black person in the theater, by the way. It was by far, trust me, it's a small, you have no idea where I live, people. But anyway, yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing feeling to see all of that come together. Go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah, I definitely gasped and leaned forward in my seat during that moment too. Just, yeah, beautiful. Going off of what you're all saying, actually, the thing that was astounding to me in an artistic level was the amount of depth of relationship and complexity of relationship that he was able to get across in a 24-hour period, right? This movie is taking place only in the span of a day, but you're able to see so much depth and complexity to these relationships because of the way that it was so intimately focused on community and, belonging and building places of belonging. And then I was also thinking artistically about how, which I mentioned to a couple of y'all earlier, how it doesn't, like, there's no speculative element until the second half of the movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about the way that in genre magazines for short fiction, we're often told, like, if your speculative element is not within the first page, then we're going to quit reading. Like, where's the speculative element? That's the thing that determines, like, immediately whether something is genre or not. And so thinking about the way that I think, LP, you put it, like, the film spends so much time building relationships and then the speculative element comes in, and that it allows that time was something that I found. I'm just thinking a lot about why in short fiction we're often so focused on the speculative having to look a certain way and be so obvious immediately in order to tell the story, and then what that might constrain in our writing.
Y'all are answering questions I haven't even asked yet. I love it. Well, you were next.
So I guess the first part, I want to answer the question. I'm actually more moved about the way Ryan has reacted to making the film. That's actually made me see to make art. So he really talked about, and he gets really choked up, that he got to do this film and not worry about money.
Mm.
And he says, when I really think about Black filmmakers like John Singleton and Spike Lee, he said to actually make Malcolm X, he had to go, the directors had to go to other Black celebrities to raise the money. And he says, and this is Malcolm X, who is culturally so profound and effective. And the fact that he was, after all of his success, he was able to make this film and not have to ask for money, that he got really choked up. And he said, just imagine what it's like if all of us could make our art and not have to ask for money, that we would just be given it because of our brilliance. That really affected me because I think it did two things. It really made me think about the stories I want to tell, and also the ways in which I want to tell a story. I don't want to just write books or write comic books or draw comic books. Like, I want to direct a film. I want to do that medium. And I think seeing Ryan's love of film and love of how he actually crafted the story is what I think is deeply inspiring, you know, and he's still really, really humble, and he's still really, really grateful. And he really mentions about his mentorship with John Singleton and with Spike Lee, and how that, you know, he really believes that he's there now to raise up other voices and other people. And I just think that is what I would like to do.
Yeah, love that, dude.
Thank you for that, Will. LP.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Jenna said about the speculative element not coming into until so late in the story, and how, like, in most places in speculative fiction, they're like, do it really quickly so we know what kind of story we're reading. And, like, I really think that has more to do with Western perspectives on what story is. I think I've heard some conversation about people thinking that the form of this is a Kisho Tenketsu story. And so if you're not familiar with Kisho Tenketsu and you've watched any anime, you know the story structure already. It's a series of reveals that don't necessarily presage or foreshadow in any necessary way, because that's not the way the story is told. And I think in this situation, and if you need like because people are weird about watching animated things, Parasite is also a Kisho Tenketsu story structure. And so we spent the better part of 2 of the 4 acts really just reacting to what the twins were doing. And then the 3rd act is when essentially happens when they walk up to the juke. And then the 4th act is what happens after Remick is dead. And it's interesting because, like, did anyone need to tell us it was a vampire story? No. It was really engaging up through then. It doesn't need, like, you can break all what I got from it, which is back to Shingai's original question, is that you can break all the rules you want to, as long as you keep it interesting and engaging up through those points. Because there was never a point in the movie, well, no, I did fall asleep the first time, but that's because I'm chronically sleep deprived. But the second I'm chronically sleep deprived. You know this. Don't play with me. But the second time I did not fall asleep because I was able to get some Coca-Cola. Thank you so much, Coca-Cola. I hate you, Coca-Cola.
Not a sponsor of this podcast.
No, not a sponsor of this podcast. They called ice on their workers. Anyway.
And they support Israel and the genocide.
There are plenty of reasons to drink Pepsi, not the least of which is that they supported Black people during Reconstruction. That's another conversation. We'll come back.
I'll say it. Pepsi tastes better. I'll say it.
I don't think Pepsi tastes better, but I'm buying Pepsi now. That's all I'm saying. Because I'm Black. But damn it, lost my train of thought talking about Pepsi.
A girl and his drink.
A girl and her drink.
Were we on breaking all the rules still? You can break all the rules?
You can break all the rules you want to, as long as it's engaged. Thank you, Jenna. That's the teacher in Jenna keeping us on track. You can break all the rules as long as the story remains engaging, as long as the characters remain interesting and realistic, and or at least authentic to them, because I wouldn't have known where the story was going. I was just watching a period piece with Michael B. Jordan acting his black ass off twice.
And the money, I'm going to say one thing about the money thing that I thought was a flawless, absolutely flawless special effects with Michael B. Jordan being two people. I forgot so many times that it was not. I mean, it's just how brilliant it was when you have two of the same person on the screen. Them sharing the cigarette out the start, I was just like, oh, that's badass. That's flawless. But I want to go back on top of what LP said. It reminded me of something I was going to say when Jenna was talking about. And this is something I told the guys before we started. I had a very interesting cinema experience because it was a cheaper ticket night. And I had some folks behind me. I had this person behind me that was probably the loudest person that I've ever heard outside of one other person I know in this town. And it's not only that, it was one of those people that everything they say is very important, very profound, and very smart, right? At the end of the film, I actually got up after the last, no, but in a bad way, LP. After there's the credits roll, then there's the scene, and I know there's a post credit scene. I had to leave. This person would not stop talking. She was railing on the pacing. And I personally took offense to that, but I was not going to turn around and have an argument with this person. But I think
you said you were the only Black person?
Oh, by far. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Only Black person in the theater. And I can say that knowing most of the Black families in town, they were not in the theater. It was interesting when her saying that sparked a conversation between me and Kate in the car. I thought the pacing was perfect. And it was because of what you were saying in the beginning, LP, building your crew, building that community and all of that. And I didn't need to see a vampire in the first couple of minutes because I knew eventually that we were going to get to the speculative piece, but it wasn't, I didn't need a signpost because it was a beautiful period piece, as you said, LP. And it was so absolutely engaging. And I wanted to know everything and be with these characters forever, even though I knew a lot of them were probably going to die. Anyway, that's sad. I know I shouldn't have said that. Jenna, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I think Will was actually next.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, the only supernatural thing we see in the beginning is when he enters the church and we see that quick flash, right?
Yeah. He's hugging his dad, right?
Yeah. To me, I agree with what everyone's saying. I think the best part is that there was spent a good amount of time of just developing, like you got to see the people. And I think if anything, that one little flash of speculativeness, because you know some shit's going to go down when you see that, all I kept thinking in my head is he was the only one who walked out. I'm in love with all of these characters. I love all of the depth. And I just, are any of them going to make it but him? That's all I kept thinking when I first saw it. And that was really like, it was like I was waiting for the heartbreak to happen. And I think what was really beautiful, because it is kind of foreshadowed that happens, but it's also the way that I was heartbroken. I felt like each character had such gravity when they were coming up against their obstacles. And that to me is really like, it's really like haunting in like the best possible way. I keep thinking about those characters and their lives and what they went through. And then they go to this moment. And that just really rings a lot to me.
Yeah, Jenna and then Yvette.
I had something I was going to say in response to Marshall and I completely forgot it. But
I was talking about the pacing.
Yeah, maybe it'll come back to me because I also wanted to say, LP, like you were saying, you can break all the rules if you keep attention. I was also thinking about how like those rules are, not only like white Western storytelling methods, but also usually only put in place to keep attention. Like they're shortcuts for keeping attention. Like that's why they are rules, not because like they're not substantive in themselves. They're supposed to be shortcuts to getting to the craft substance of, you know, keeping people's attention, because they'll stop reading if, you know, this, or they'll stop watching if that. And so, you know, the way that you're thinking about, like, you can break all those if you're keeping people's attention, it's because, yeah, you don't need them. Those are shorthands for keeping attention. So if you are telling a story for the audience you're telling it to in a way that is engaging that audience, then those rules really are unnecessary and just hindrances. And I had something else, and maybe it'll come back to me and maybe it won't.
Yeah, adding on to that, to LP and your point about breaking all the rules. One of the things I loved is like how it's playing with different genres. So it's Southern Gothic, it's a vampire movie, but it's also a musical. And like, as a certified musical hater, I was vibing throughout the movie, and it like works, right? So like, yeah, I don't know, like, if I know LP, you're like always the music person. I don't know if you want to comment on the musical aspect of the story and why it works so much that even I, like a hater of musicals, actually was vibing throughout.
When that vampire started doing the Irish dancing, I was like, oh shit, this is badass, dude. Get going.
Right,
it was awesome.
Right.
I wasn't going to say anything about the music yet, but like, since we're here, I think part of what makes that work in so many ways, and I think it also speaks to what Jenna was just saying about like those rules, and the rules are arbitrary, except for in the ways that the Western tradition of storytelling goes, we've taught people where to look for things to happen. And when they don't happen in those time frames, people start feeling like, oh, well, the pacing's off. And like, the pacing's not off. I'm asking you to look at something for what it is instead of expecting something from it. But one of the things about this, like these really beautiful relationships that we see uncovered, every point along the way, there's music that's also uncovered. And the music isn't like, I've just met the most beautiful woman. Her name is Perline. And then there's a musical sketch, right? Stack asks Sammy if he still got the guitar, are you playing it? And then he plays it, and Stack is genuinely surprised because his cousin is so good.
Love that moment.
And then they get Jenna, remember what she was going to say. And then they get on stage and they play, and like the whole room goes up for Slim, and it goes up for Sammy, and it goes up for Perline, right? And so whenever the music happens, it's not like let's step out of reality and have this surreal musical number where we've got these dances going. There are those, but like those are to prove a point. They're all grounded in people actually enjoying music, and we don't have anyone singing badly like Leah Michelle. So that's great. One of the other things that like makes everyone super endearing the whole way through is like everyone who died permanently sacrificed themselves. Smoke, Annie, Slim, Perline, everyone was like, I'm going to do what I can to make sure these people in my community can get out. It didn't work for a lot of people, but like everyone, and like, I know people are really hating Grace because they don't have any grace for her, but like baby girl went out on fire with a stake in her hand.
Yeah.
Like she was like, I'm taking one, at least one. And like, but everybody, once it was down to those final, how many was it? 6, 7? Like those final people, it was a wrap, which is interesting because the juxtaposition of that is like, I'm going to stop talking in a moment, I promise. Remick, pulls people into this community, and then they lose their individuality. And like this weird kind of response to, because usually when we're talking about communitarianism, I'm like pro-communitarianism, but in this situation, the individuals were the people who were in the right. So it's an interesting take because under normal circumstances, I'm for the hive mind, but like individualism in this case is like the autonomy, the capacity to make the decision, like Annie's decision, like I've been bitten, kill me so that I can't come back as a part of that. I get to decide how I die. And I need you to carry that out for me. And I just thought that was really great.
Jenna, you remember what you were going to say?
I remembered what I was going to say, and it was when LP was talking about the surprise at the music, but the music just fitting. And then I was thinking about the pacing again and the way that the speculative element is also the violence here, right? And it's the disruptive element to the Black cultural space that they're building. And that, like, it makes sense that like, it's true to life that is something that, like, people are building and going about their lives. And then, like, the violence of whiteness or, you know, racist systems descends on people who are just going about their own damn business. And so in that way too, the pacing made a lot of sense to me, to have the relationships be building and people doing the things that they're doing. And then, like, that violence descends as the speculative element later suddenly makes a lot of sense, I think.
So, like, as you were speaking, LP, about, like, the music, and I'm like, and I feel like so stupid for not, like, picking this up earlier, but I was like, wait, of course it makes sense that there's music because it's pulling from West African griot traditions. You know, you can think about, we always talk about Ngano, and a key feature of Ngano and those folktales is music, right? And if Coogler is pulling from that, that makes sense that there's music all over that, because music is used in, you know, in those folk tales to re-emphasize the themes, to engage the audience. There's call and response where the audience can also sing along with the storyteller. So I'm just like, oh wait, realizing that now, and that, like, makes it even more cooler that you could say that it's actually pulling from these African griot traditions, and in the way that they use music in the story.
And also, like, I mean, yes, and in that, like, also Black American traditions where, like, music wasn't a thing that was separate from life. It was like, and you see it a little bit in that scene where Slim is telling the story about his friend who got lynched. And, like, then there was this moan and then the tapping of the leg. And then, like, you got that guitar, you better start playing. And it was just like, this is how pain turns into music, you know?
Right. And you mentioned that moment. And I loved the way they did that without showing the violence of the lynching. That it was like,
you could hear it.
Like, sonically, yeah, you could hear it, but you didn't see it on the page. And that's something that I think about in my own work, is that, you know, I want to talk about this violence, but I don't want to kind of repeat it on the page. So how do I explore that without re-traumatizing my audience? And I think Coogler found a way to do it in film that was really impactful.
And I think part of that too was, like, the balancing out with scenes and moments of just pure spiritual joy, like the dancing, the way that music has such a gravitas because it's also communication with the ancestors and the descendants. That to me felt like what a lot of Black artists have been doing for a long time, which is, how can we talk about living in the midst of so much dying? Yeah, I really love that point of it. Well,
do you remember the scene when Delta Slim was in the car and they passed the prisoners and they broke out in song? Do y'all remember that scene? That scene of them singing was not in the script. So it was actually going to be Delta Sim was supposed to have a 3-page monologue. And what happened is Delroy, who plays that character, asked Ryan, can we please go over this so we can get into the scene? And the three of them agreed to it. And then suddenly he started playing the harmonica, and then he got on the guitar, and that song is completely improv'd. And Ryan just kept shooting. And that's when they said, that's when the music really suddenly, like, they could feel the story in their bones. And that 3-page monologue that he was going to have, they filmed it. And Delroy was like, I really wish Ryan kept it. But the way the music just interacted with the way the scene went, Ryan was like, the music is enough. The music of them suddenly spontaneously singing and it coming from the actors was just enough for the story. So I found that just really fascinating.
And like LP said, there was that going from that moment, that story to that music is like that release of that pain in the form of music. And it was just such a, I don't know. It was one of those moments I'm just like, oh, you felt pain, but you know, the music had to be the solution to the pain. You know what I mean? I don't know. I love that moment. Absolutely.
I'm gonna throw in, because I've been talking a little bit about fucking around and finding out. On my alt, I have a bookmark of white people saying the N-word and getting the shit beat out of them, because there's a version of it where when those things happen in contemporary spaces, Black people are prone to reach back with all the strength of the ancestors and slap the living shit out of somebody that they wouldn't have been able to do historically, right? And it's the aspect of like people using words and thinking words don't mean things because the words don't mean things to them. And in the same way, like this is a generational ass whooping that a person is catching, but like in the same way, in that time, there wasn't a place to put it but the blues. There wasn't a fighting back. Because later on you see when they're like, well, maybe we should let them in. They have money. It's like, we don't know them. And what happens if someone spills a drink on them or someone steps on their shoe, and then we have a whole different problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like the entire time, you know, while the twins are like in pursuit of like a capitalistic goal, they're also in pursuit of protecting their community, which looks like paying that little girl and teaching her to negotiate the worth of her time, right? Or going to the chows and negotiating with Grace about the cost of the sign and the flowers for the grave. You know, he did bring Annie partly because she's his love, but he knew that she could fry the shit out some fucking fish, right? And so it's like, okay, what's important here versus what's not important here, and so like. In those ways, it's like it was doubly important after realizing how well Sammy was playing and how well Sammy was singing that he meets Slim. Like Slim had some wisdom to impart, but Slim was also an elder statesman in these blues streets. And to his own credit, Slim was like, "Baby, I don't know how many more years I got. Let me go ahead and get this money."
LP, you bring me to another question very beautifully. Since we're talking about capitalism, let's get into it a little bit, because there's so much conversation about money throughout this whole film. And not only money, but like what is valuable enough to barter, because the conversation between Stack and Slim, when they're talking about Slim coming to play for them, he's like, you're going to give me $20? That's not enough. Also, I don't believe y'all are going to last like the night after tonight and the nights after that. And then Stack is like, what if I give you $20, $40 and Irish beer? And that's the thing that gets him to change his mind. And then there's also the conversation that happens in the juke joint when the community, like the poorest of the community, bring wooden coins, and they're like, this is what we have. And there's a conversation between Annie, Stack, and Smoke. And Smoke is like, this is not valuable. And Annie and Stack are the ones who actually make the case that this night is for this community, and they've worked hard for what they've brought in. So this is valuable to us because it is valuable to them. So I think my question here is, even within the constraints of capitalism, how did you notice marginalized folks subvert the expectations of what is considered valuable and what isn't in this movie or in your personal history? Yes, LP.
I mean, it happened at the very outset. In choosing the people who were going to come, it wasn't because they knew them. They knew a lot of people. You know, he walked up to that little girl and was like, "Do you know the Smokestack twins?" "I'm Stack." And she was like, right? Like from the very outset, they knew who they wanted to bring in because they knew what skills they had. They knew what was going to help them achieve this endeavor. And so they knew whose participation was going to be valuable. They got everything that they need. They gave that white man the bag of money and told him not to come back. And like, that's that. I love the wood and nickel conversation because I don't think that people understood that, like, when I was a kid, when I was a kid in grade school, we used to sing this song. It was like 16 tons digging that number, 9 coal, you dig 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, because I can't come. I owe my soul to the company store. So essentially, people living on this land, and they're not able to, and they're renting the land from the company, and the company's paying them sub wages, but they're not actually paying them wages. They're paying them in wooden nickels, and the wooden nickels are all they can use to buy things from the company store. So essentially, they've gone from being enslaved to being enslaved through debt, because they can't make it. It's not possible to make enough money to make actual money, because they owe. They're not going to give them actual money, because they give them actual money, they might be able to save it and go. And so the wooden nickels conversation was actually, I thought, really powerful, because on one side it's like, this doesn't have any value outside of this plantation or this company town. But the other side of it is like, what are we bringing to the table? Like, what do we have to bring to the table? You can't demand from people what they don't have. Or you can demand people what they don't have. But what happens if everyone comes with wooden nickels and then nobody eats the fish? Nobody drink that beer. Also, it's prohibition at the time. I don't know if I said this already, but alcohol was illegal. So Slim had just been drinking corn liquor, moonshine, the entire time. So when he gets a taste of that beer, he hadn't had anything that wasn't moonshine in who knows how long. The moonshine is historically inconsistent. So, like, it can taste like anything depending on who made the batch. You can have a favorite person you get it from, but if you have, like, beer bottled, he drank that beer hot.
Yeah.
Who likes the taste of warm beer? Nobody.
Well, and he added too, he's like, we have a lot more of this and it's ice cold, right? And that's what I liked about that last little bit of convincing, which I thought was cool. There was another aspect of that conversation that I don't know if it's a pivotal thing, but because they don't kind of come back to it. But I think it was the end of the conversation, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Smoke says he shows him the paper, and he's like, by the end of, we will have zero money. If we do it this way, we'll have zero money at a certain point in the future, right? But that didn't. I think what I like about that is it wasn't enough to sway them to not at least have that night and let this community be what they needed, you know. And I thought that was a really the capitalist part was there, but it can't overshadow the need that the community had for this space. I thought that was a nice moment.
Just a quick thought on the wooden nickels. There's something intimate about accepting them as well. Like, they are worthless to the people who are taking them in terms of spending power, right? But they didn't pass them back to the man. There was something valuable in the act of receiving something as well.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like sacrificing to the gods, where, like, you know, this goat that you killed to sacrifice to a god doesn't mean anything to you, to a fucking god. It's a fucking goat, right? But this goat was the last of the goats that you had. It was your last opportunity to make milk. So the sacrifice, it means something to the person giving it more than the person accepting it. Yeah.
But there's a valuing of that meaning in the acceptance, because Absolutely. I think, you know, people could just be like, oh, no need, and feel like they're doing a good thing. But there's that misses that value and holding that value in community with someone.
And we see it all the time when we see people receive things that they don't value. Right? Or like, one of my friends, she makes all of her family's gifts. She knits things. She like makes cards and shit and all the things. And like everyone in her family is like, don't nobody want these. People like it when you buy them gifts. And it's like, oh, that hurts, because I put a lot of time and energy and heart into this. But it's like, you can't, there's nothing that my friend can do to make her family appreciate the gifts that she creates for them. So it's like, okay, great. I'm going to take this because this is what you have of value. I also want to say to what Marshall was saying before, they're saying if it keeps going like this, then we're not going to break even. But I also read that as if this is a success tonight, then this could be more successful in the pursuant nights, and then we can make a profit. But right now, we have to invest in this business in order to make this business make sense.
And refresh my memory, I'm not sure which of the twins suggests having that conversation with the white folks about money, right? Because that was it Stack? Okay, yeah.
It was always Stack.
Yeah, okay.
So knew better.
Yeah. Well, but Stack's like, hey, you're so concerned about, us getting income. Maybe those white folks have some money. Like maybe we can figure something out, right? And I feel like there's an underlying knowledge of, I know this can't last, but maybe there's another way we can supplement it, and why not take it from those seemingly nice white folks that can sing pretty good. There was nothing ominous about that anyway.
And y'all are reminding me of a scene with the absolute goddess, Annie, where she literally held up a knife to Smoke's neck because he took her money, which he considered not valuable and useless, and was like, I'm going to give you this money that was like, God knows, like hundreds of dollars or whatever it was. And she was like, I don't want your blood money. Yeah. I don't want that shit. This money that wasn't considered valuable, she used for her root work. And you saw the exchange happening with a kid who came into her space. Yeah. And she was like, make sure you take this home to your mama because I don't want her coming for me. And the kid gave her the money. And like that's also so meaningful and such a reminder to me why she's the best of all of them.
My wife said the same thing.
Beginning. She was also the most anti-capitalist. She was also the one who was like, the value is not just what these white men say the value is. The value is in the exchange. It's in, like LP, you were saying, the energy that was put into making the sacrifice.
Yeah. I didn't read her as anti-capitalist. I read her as like, she was happy to barter with people with what people had to barter, right? Like she was never going to tell them like if it's not greenbacks then I don't want it. She took wood nickels and like she was willing to work within that system, and she wasn't trying to graduate to the system that Smoke was working in, partly because she knew the way that she knew how he moved. She knew he moved sideways, but like laboring under a debtor system under capitalism is still laboring under capitalism. You know what I mean?
It's true. I mean, they were all working within a capitalist system, but I think she was subverting capitalism. Maybe that's the language that I should have used.
Okay.
Well.
So in my real life of people subverting capitalism, so I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and who and where? Camden, New Jersey. Y'all can Google it. There was a Republican who came into power when I was a kid, and they took away all of the resources that we had. And we had, like, if anyone knows about Camden, it had like the highest murder capital in the country. It was considered the most dangerous city in America, even worse than like Compton. The funny thing is, I love where I grew up. I saw more kindness and community than I've ever seen anywhere. And when the programs were really there to help keep us off of the street, which a lot of us were in gangs and were getting involved in that because gangs equaled protection, equaled money, equaled healthcare in a lot of ways. So my friend Tisha, who I grew up with, her mom had a beauty salon and her dad had a barber shop, and that's how I got into hair. But when they heard that these programs, especially during the weekends, what they were designed for is after school, we could go to the art center, we could go to the science center, like this community center, we could play basketball until 2 a.m. Adults were there. It was taken away. So what her mom and dad did is they actually raised the funds and people volunteered to keep it going for a year. And the minute that they just couldn't do it anymore because, things were tough, is the year that 3 of my friends were shot by cops and died. So, but it really showed me a lot of that you can lean on your community and you could do wonderful things, because a lot of the kids that I grew up with, a lot of them died or were in jail, but then a lot of them who were able to be in those programs that the community provided despite any type of non-government help, went on to become like doctors, lawyers, musicians, and like they were great people. Everyone I grew up with was great. It just came about like opportunity. And I think that's just a good example of subverting capitalism and having value in your own community.
Yeah, Jenna.
I don't know if I have a point so much as a thought, because I'm thinking about Sammy choosing the remnants of a guitar, like what we value. And at the end, like what he values is that music and that connection across time and to the ancestors, to this like soul depth. And I'm thinking about something about how even choosing that is in itself a reevaluate, like it's valuing differently than capitalism would ask us to value things. I know that you could read it as like, oh, but he was a successful musician and that's making money, but it wasn't about that, right? That's not the reason. Like the value is in the music and the connection it wrought itself. And that even that choice to me feels like it's placing value elsewhere outside of that system.
That's a great point, which actually leads me to another question, which is so much of the movie is about the relationship between music, art making, and spirituality. And I want to bring it back to y'all's writing and art making. And I'm curious about the relationship between your writing and ancestral veneration, or whatever else you would name as spirit work. LP.
It's a very great question, by the way.
I use names of family members in almost all of my stories. Occasionally there are some where I've made some stuff up, but like there are callbacks to family members all the time. And if you think about my short story, Open 27 Hours, is like well, the lead character, her name is Yanis, and that's my middle sister's middle name. And it's really kind of a story about me paying some love to my mom, who would take me to like all of these super like in neighborhood diners. Like there's this restaurant in Bronzeville in Chicago. It's Bronzeville now. Back then it was the low end. But like Miss Gladys had been walking around the restaurant since 1948. And when she was older and not really able to walk, somebody held her arm and walked her through the restaurant. She said hi to everybody as they ate the food. And some of them she'd known for years and years and years because she watched them grow up. Gladys is no longer there, but it was really heavily the influence from Miss Birdie and Miss Birdie's Cafe.
Just similar to LP, I mean, that just reminded me that I do the same exact thing. So there's a story I recently started. It was inspired by the FIA theme for that. Deadline is today. There's no scenario I hit it. But I started writing this story. And it's probably out the gate, probably, I don't know if this is a weird thing, like the blackest thing I've written. It's about community. It starts with this block party. All these black folks are making food and all this stuff's going on. And the main character walks up to a barbecue grill and there's triplets. And my dad's brothers' name are Sanders, Adrian, and Donald Ray. My dad has lost two of the three, except for the youngest, my uncle Sanders. And it was a kind of an opportunity for me to be like, you know, I'm going to put them in this story, right? I remember them from when I was a kid, you know, but they've been gone quite some time now, you know, and it's just like, I do that. I mean, I do that all the time. And, you know, nicknames for my family members and stuff like that. I try to incorporate the people that I love and the reason that I exist the way I do in my works any way I can. And if it's just a name, that's one thing. But in my novel, the novel I'm querying, I mean, my kids are two of the characters in the crew, a version of them, right? And that's really important to me. I don't know. Thanks LP for saying that. I was trying to figure out how I could answer that question, and that's certainly how I do it.
Jenna, go for it.
I think about ancestral relations pretty broadly as human and non-human kinship networks, in part, I think, because I don't know that I want to just venerate my ancestors. There's a lot of shit back there that deserves to be cut off. So I reach out, I think, to try to connect deeply with non-human kin, land, and water a lot in the ways that I think about things. I do a lot of, I guess, processing of dreams, and dream work comes through in a lot of my stories. Actually, you asking this question was interesting, Shingai, because I spent, for some reason, this entire weekend going back through my journals of the past 3 years to chronicle all the dreams that I have written down and type them up onto my computer. And it was something that I just felt like called to do on Saturday. And it took me 3 days. And I now have 16,000 words of dreams typed up over the past few years. But there are also things where I've seen lots of, if not direct messaging, then patterns that reappear that work into my storytelling as well. And sometimes I think there are things that will just appear to me that I think come from those ancestral networks, and that I'm called to just sit down and write and just find myself writing things that I didn't know I needed to write. So I try to, for me, I guess ancestral veneration looks like listening and taking the time to connect to the land around me so that I can listen to the way that it speaks.
Thank you for sharing that, Jenna. Yvette, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. Look at that. It's like I knew.
Serendipity. I've been, trying to engage with like aspects of my culture that have been demonized. So ancestors, spirit mediums. And I wonder for you guys if you've felt any pushback against, engaging with some of those topics. Like, for example, somebody from my home country, Zimbabwe, told me that they were afraid to pick up my book and to read my book because the cover was demonic. And so my cover has a woman with a mask, and the mask reminded them of these masked dancers back home called rigure, and they they deal with a lot of like this, they're possessed by spirits, and then they're engaging with the ancestors as they're dancing. And so they say that, that was evil. So they're not going to pick up the book because of that masked figure on the cover. So, and we see that in the movie as well with, Sammy, trying to, play his music, the blues, and then his father tells him, "Oh, this is demonic. Don't do it. The blues is the devil." So I wonder, if you've received that kind of pushback with your own work and trying to engage with these things, and how do you continue engaging with that when there's pushback from like your own community, when there's pushback from maybe the Black church, like we see in Sinners, from, Black Christianity? How do you continue to do that ancestral veneration with that pushback?
There was always going to be pushback because before I started deconstructing Christianity for myself, I already transitioned into Buddhism. And so there was already some side eye in my life about like the idea of holding someone, anyone, anything the Most High, but also abdicating, like professing free will, but also abdicating like any actual agency in life to a higher being was a lot for me. And I guess the biggest thing, like spiritually, and you see this in Sinners, bringing it back around, when Remick is killing Sammy launches into the Lord's Prayer, and then Remick is like, oh, I know that too. Oh, it's like, bitch, you ain't the only one. And like the ways in which, thinking about the way that indigenous belief systems were beaten out of Black people in America and forced to adopt Christianity. And while people were using Christianity to say is a benevolent religion, but also using it as as proof of concept for why slavery is important, why Black people are not people, to come out of that. And it's interesting because, I talk about this a little in my zombie novel, that like the idea that death is a relief from this pain, right? Like I'm not gonna have to work when it's over. What is it? Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning, right? We'll get to the other side, but like white people weren't thinking that the other side was where the joy would come. That came in life for them. And then Black people just had to wait until they died and just make sure they were good, and they died. And it was like, that's fucked theology. It's and anytime that a religion has been weaponized against you, anytime that your religion has been weaponized against you, and like you're in a space where interrogating the religion is blasphemous, this is what abuse looks like. And Black people in America have been abused by Christianity for a really long time. And like the fights, the TikToks about people like, I can't see Sinners because it's demonic. I was like, wait, what? Baby, you're 25% white. That's demonic. How that got into your bloodline, that's demonic. This movie is scaring you and not like the epigenetics of it all? Okay, girl, go off. Stay home with your raggedy ass.
And can y'all are bringing it back for me also to Annie. Sorry for geeking out on her so much, but like, this is why she was so important for me, I think. Like, despite the fact that like, she's a sexy ass, full-bodied Black woman doing what she does and making everyone thirst for her, as she should. She's also a hoodoo practitioner and spiritual herbalist, and seeing that on screen in a way that is not demonized or even not even fetishized. It wasn't like, she was just out here living her life. This was the work of her life. In fact, smoke comes and interrupts the work of her life to be like, hey, come and do this thing this tonight with me and my brother. But I think that was deeply powerful because I don't get to see Black people going back into their spiritual culture and history and just having that as valid. And I'm in a lot of queer spaces in Kenya where folks are going back into our tribal histories to find the deities that we worshipped and the ways that we worshipped the deities that we worshipped. And I think that that's been something that I've been feeling called to also in my own work. Because like both you, Yvette, and LP said, colonization used religion to demonize our relationship to our own spirituality.
I want to add 2 things to that if I can before we go.
Yeah.
Voodoo and hoodoo were parallel practices to Christianity, right? Voodoo specifically to Catholicism, and then hoodoo wherever it was practiced. Like it wasn't an either or concept, but it's interesting because in the South, a lot of people who were super saved villainized hoodoo and voodoo. Meanwhile, a lot of Black American customs are rooted in hoodoo, like walking in your house backward, like not whistling at night, like throwing salt over your shoulder, like not splitting the pole. Like there are all these things that like we don't know why we do them, but they are rooted in these customs that we don't. And I'm from Chicago, right? Like I have family who's in the South, but baby, child, like we ain't nobody talking about the South. We're just like walking down the streets, like go back around. What? Go back around. What are you talking about? You just split the pole. Go back around. And stop doing this shit to me. And like people getting into fights with you, getting genuinely angry at you for doing something that will cause harm in that way.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Stay tuned
For part 2. Yeah.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.